Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 136. It's a Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, it's NBZ, that's me, 3 letters, N to the B to the Z. That's what we say here in the UK. None of that Z nonsense.
N to the B to the Z.
I'm joined by Bally. You can't really do the same thing with your name, can you? I mean, it doesn't sound quite as succinct.
B to the double L-Y?
B to the A. Missing the A, man.
Yeah, I know, but...
Just skipping letters.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not rappers, clearly, not in any way or shape or form gangster enough to do any of that stuff. We're also British, so that's, it's just not proper, is it, to be spitting rhymes. What am I even saying?
I mean, there's loads of rap music in the UK.
There is. No, you're right. You're very right. I'm being just racist against the UK. But here we look. We don't do any of that. We're here to talk about Nintendo video games and other video game things, and playing with controllers and TVs and stuff like that. And put it onto a podcast that you can listen to, and that's what we're doing here today. How are you doing today, Bally?
I'm good. I'm Bally, and I don't. I'm not a big fan of rap.
No, neither of us are. I think maybe that's the bias creeping in here, is that neither of us care for rap one iota, except for maybe a bit of Linkin Park, because it mixes the type of music we like with rap.
Yeah, and I certainly think a band like Rage Against the Machine, Zach De La Rocha, definitely you could define that as rap.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm definitely into that, but yeah, I can't.
What is it with this new year and us talking about music at the start of the podcast?
Yeah, I don't know,
Got to get back into it, man. Back into it.
I mean, there haven't been a ton of games coming out, so I guess that's made us feel more musical.
Yeah, there you go. Fantastic. Well, we have a show coming up for you today. We're going to talk about a lot of things. Bally, do you want to lay it out for us for the rest of the show?
So for our first segment, we're going to talk about what we have been playing. Second segment will be some emails. And the third segment this week is going to be a bit of a news roundup. There's been a few big stories. I mean...
There's one big story in
particular. Metroid Prime 4 is a big story. And there's also that Nindies Direct, which obviously happened just after our last episode.
Yeah, which I don't know if we even call it a Nindies Direct, because it was just a YouTube video that Nintendo Europe dropped.
Right.
And I don't think the US arm of Nintendo really promoted it or talked about it at all, or did their own version. So, but yeah, lots of stuff to talk about there.
Good stuff in there. And then importantly, we should say the poll has been decided. Our next Backlog Club number 6 is going to be announced at the end of the show, so you won't want to miss that.
Yeah, stay tuned for that, and we'll be having a game that we'll all play through together again, which will be fun. All right, let's kick things off then with our regular good old video games. What we've been playing, Bally. You went back to the SNES Classic once more.
I did indeed. Starfox 2. That's a cool thing that came out in 2017.
Yeah, the hottest release of 2017, Starfox 2.
So I never got... Well, neither of us ever got round to it. I think 2017 was just a bit of a stellar year, and
I think the end of that year, I was actually playing quite a lot of games on the classic. But I was catching up on I played Yoshi's Island, I played through Super Castlevania 4, and I played through Donkey Kong Country. And I did actually play the first Star Fox. I think the first game I beat on the classic was the original Star Fox. And I was like, wow, this game holds up so well. It really, I didn't expect it to feel as grand and sweeping as it was. And just the idea of the FX chip, and I obviously the frame rate is a nightmare, but for some reason it just kind of works. It fits it and it makes sense.
It's a smooth 6 frames.
It's consistent at the very least in its low frame rate.
The word I'm looking for rather than smooth.
Right.
But yeah, would you believe Star Fox 2 is the 6th Star Fox game that I've played?
Really?
Yeah.
Man, you've played every Star Fox game basically.
So if you count Star Fox 1, Star Fox 64, which I played on 3DS, Star Fox Guard, Star Fox Zero, and then I dabbled in a bit of Star Fox Adventure back in the day. So if you count that, this is the 6th game I've played, and
you never played Assault or Command. Those
never
are the
done
two.
Assault on the DS and Command.
No, Assault is the GameCube.
Assault,
Command is
Command.
the
Yes, right, got you.
Yeah.
But this game, Star Fox 2, is ridiculously bold with what it's trying to go for. It's essentially it's combining real-time strategy with short space fights, and in that sense, is a roguelike. You do a run. Each run takes it depends how successful you are. So my first run took maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. And I hadn't looked at anything online. I just went straight in, and it went pretty pear-shaped. But essentially, you have to constantly manage attacks coming in from Andros that onto Corneria. And there are a number of planets out in the ether, and there's little asteroids, and he sends little ships that come hurtling towards Corneria in real time, and you have to fly your little ship into those comets or ships, and then it opens up a little dogfight sequence. And in that dogfight sequence, it's all the game almost is first person perspective dogfights. You have to clear out. So
you never see your actual ship like in the original.
So you do on a few of the levels. So half the levels are these dogfights where you're fighting random ships, or intermittently the team of Starwolf will come in one by one. So like Pigma, the chameleon dude, Starwolf, like they're almost like fixed chapters that will happen throughout the time. But beyond that, if you let, like, say you don't catch up with a missile and it's coming for Corneria might take 20% damage, and when you get to 100% damage, that's game over. Andros has won. The galaxy has been obliterated. So you have to like manage moving your ship in an overworld map in real time towards these things. And then, like I said, when you make contact with them, it starts like a little dogfight. And then, but during the dogfight, stuff is moving on the map still in real time. So it's in your interest to clear up that dogfight as fast as possible.
Oh, wow, really? Man.
So you're able to like move to the next thing. So you do have the help of like a laser that randomly charges, not random, it's systematic, but it takes time to charge up. And then if it's charged up and it's facing a missile, it'll just shoot. There's also like larger ships that fire missiles, and then each one of those is actually a mission. And the cool thing about these missions is they inspired some of the missions in Star Fox Zero, and that's actually a big thing I like a lot about this game, is the Chicken Walker from Star Fox Zero. Like, was the original incarnation. So on these levels where you might get like a warning like, oh, they're charging up their missile, you need to infiltrate the missile ship, and you will fly as the R-Wing, through like the defeating enemies, and then you will transform into the Chicken Walker and run through the middle of the ship and like shoot the core and destroy that missile shooting ship that you had to infiltrate, essentially. And there's a couple of those on the map. There's another planet where you fly to the planet, you run around the surface as a Chicken Walker, like destroying like certain spots, and then you go like into the planet and defeat the core. So again, there's like these little...
It's like a kind of like rotating boss, isn't it? Like in the middle.
Yeah. So, and all the levels are in all range mode, I should say. So whether it's first person or whether it's the third person where you swap, and you can actually swap between the Chicken Walker and the R-Wing, like on the fly as you wish, which is kind of cool for a game that was meant to come out in 1996.
Right. Yeah.
So you can like, because it's faster to fly through the level as the R-Wing, but it can be harder to like stop yourself hitting enemies, bouncing off the walls, taking damage. And taking damage in this in this game, you have to fly all the way back to like your hub area in the overworld in order to heal, which takes a lot of time. So you really want to watch yourself. And actually, there's a number of characters you can pick at the start of each run. So you have to pick a pilot and a co-pilot. So Falco and Fox are your sort of vanilla. They're pretty fast, have a lot of health. But then you've got like Peppy and Slippy, who have slower ships but have even more health. And then you have the two new characters whose names I can't remember. It's like this girl fox thing. And
it's like a bunny rabbit, maybe?
Yeah, I can't remember. And they are basically incredibly fast, but incredibly low health. So I always went for health over speed, because I just thought, I don't want to have to worry about constantly
It's all about
dying.
survivability, isn't it?
Exactly.
You know?
So, because if your ship dies, that's also game over. Well, you go to your co-pilot, and then if they die, it's game over. So, like,
so you have like a kind of second chance.
You've got a backup.
Yeah.
So you could go like, right, I'll go Starfox, Fox McCloud for like my number one because he's good, he's faster, and then I'll go Peppy in backup because he's got more can take more damage or something.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you can like mix and match which styles you want to have to like balance it almost.
Yeah. And like the frame rate still feels like Star Fox 1.
Right.
And
I can imagine it may be worse at some spots just because the ambition of what they're doing. Like I remember seeing this like giant dragon thing that like chases you and shit, which seemed like that would take up a lot of kill the frame rate quite a bit.
So as I said, like in the overworld, there will be the missiles that you're trying to like infiltrate in real time, but then there'll be these fixed things that Andros will just send through, and then eventually there's like a final Andros fight, which is very weird, and I don't want to like spoil what it looks like or anything, but it's very weird. It's very trippy. It's very much like maybe they never actually finished the end of this game and they've just done something weird to get this out in 2017. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to look at. And I can totally see why this game was shelved, because this game was meant to come out in 96 and then Star Fox 64 came out in 97. And if you look at the jump in what Star Fox 64 is doing as a game, it's insane. Like how, I mean, obviously it's the power of the N64 versus the power of a Super Nintendo, but it is insane how big of a jump that is. But what's cool about this game is that it's bold. It's doing something completely different from Star Fox 1.
And it fits with the Nintendo tradition of the second entry just being off the wall and weird.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like it's a roguelike with, one run based with like multiple different weird characters. It is definitely not the traditional Star Fox experience from the first game, which like Star Fox 64 basically took that first game and like it's the same idea with Zelda to Link to the Past, and you have Zelda 2 in the middle, which is just an off-the-wall strange thing. Same with Castlevania, like 1 and 3 are similar, but 2 is just this strange open world, like non-linear kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and the idea that Star Fox 2 has kind of its seed has spread almost in a weird metaphorical way, because elements of that game exist now in other Star Fox games, like as you were saying with Zero and the Chicken Walker, but also Star Fox Command is a lot like that in terms of having this map and you're like going to different like mini battles, as it were, and like you're doing a route. It seems like that idea was cribbed from Star Fox 2 for the DS game. So despite the fact that it's now actually out and you can play it, it feels like a lot of those ideas were taken and put in other places in the series over time, which is cool. And I think that's definitely a unique game.
Yeah, I love the history of Star Fox 2, and it's literally only, if you can beat it on first run, it takes about 40 minutes. I only beat it on second run, but I would advise trying to beat it first run, just seeing what it's like, and then when everything goes south, just look up like some tips on make sure you don't let this thing hit that and that sort of thing. And then I did it second time fairly straightforwardly. It's not. Did I use it? Yeah, I did use some save states, but like not as many as I would normally use with another Super Nintendo game. So yeah, worth checking out. It's very quick, and I just love its place in Star Fox history, as you said. Like my favorite game still is Star Fox Zero by quite a long way in terms of Star Fox games. But like,
controversial opinion.
Controversial, but I like what this game has that inspired that game. But yeah, Star Fox 2, worth checking out on that.
I think it has like multiple difficulty levels, doesn't it? So that you can like go through on a trickier setting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was normal, hard, and very hard or something.
Right.
And normal was like, thanks very
normal
much.
was hard enough, yeah.
So it's not an overly difficult game. It's cool. I definitely recommend checking it out.
Cool.
I also been playing the first game I'm playing this year that's actually come out this year, and that's Wargroove. I've been anticipating this game a long time, and I'm only 6, 7, 8 missions in, and it's exactly what I was hoping for so far.
So for people who don't know what Wargroove is, it's basically Advance Wars.
It's a take on Advance Wars with some changes that I'll get into, but overall it's that exact same itch. So before I start off though, one random thing this game does that is unique to any Switch game I've played so far, I believe, is it resizes the map based on whether you're in handheld mode or dock to play.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So it took me a while to notice. I was a bit like, it looks a bit weird. What's going on? And then like I realized, oh wait, I'm in docked mode, and it just zooms out quite a lot further, which I don't like that much because I find when I'm in docked mode, the whole sprite design is very small, and I'm a bit like straining my eyes a little bit, and a lot of the text is very small, which feels everything feels better about this game in handheld mode from what I've played so far. Not that it's unplayable in docked or anything. It's just I probably prefer it in handheld. And I should check the options to see if I can.
And obviously, the tradition of Advance Wars is handheld anyway, so it kind of matches that to some degree.
Yeah, and that's kind of why when I was playing Advance Wars games on the Wii U, it kind of looked gloriously hilarious in the size of the sprites on it, like blowing that up. And this game doesn't really blow that up in docked. It just kind of zooms out a bit, which I don't know. I have mixed feelings about. But yeah, I'm 4 to 5 hours in. Each campaign mission so far is still introducing new units, which is cool. So like, it's not just a quick 10 easy missions like Advance Wars and on you go. It kind of structures in quite difficult missions from the off, kind of introducing one unit at a time. There's definitely a larger range of units than I thought initially. Like, for example, you get archers fairly early on, and I thought, right, I've got my long range unit, but then the mission I just did, I've unlocked trebuchets, and they are just like exaggerated versions of archers, and I was specifically having to fire them at these giants, and I was like, wow, giants? What are they? And so they're like another unique unit, and just that fantasy setting is really cool so far. So
it's like this kind of medieval mix with like fantastical elements,
fantasy, exactly. So I'm playing as the Cherry Kingdom, who are your sort of vanilla human people in
what a surprise.
Bed. No, I mean, you don't have a choice. Like, this is part of the story, and I think you maybe change factions based on the story, but there's also this vampire Redead Kingdom who are called the Felheim, and then there's these tree-like people made of plants who are the Florian tribe. And so the giants I was facing, for example, were like these huge ent-like walking tree things.
Great.
And
great.
All that sprite design and the animations are incredible. Like that, it looks so good. And so I've had those 3 factions, and there's a 4th faction that I've not seen yet, and all the factions are the same. The units are just skinned differently. So like, there is a giant equivalent for the Cherry Kingdom I've not seen yet, and giants for the vampire, the Felheim Kingdom, and so on.
So like, the same types of units will exist, but they'll be skinned differently.
Exactly.
And will they have different abilities? Do they do different things, or are they kind of just a reskin?
So abilities and unique, I guess, unique abilities are saved for the commanders, which are probably the biggest, or one of the biggest changes between this and Advance Wars. So every faction has like 3 or 4 commanders, and depending on the mission, I've only played the campaign so far, so I don't know how it works in like arcade mode and stuff, where I assume you can just choose your commander and choose which units you're using, etc. So the commanders I've been using so far have been Cherry Kingdom commanders, and there's a dog called Caesar, there's a mage called Emmerich, and then there's the queen, whose name I've forgotten, but essentially each commander has different abilities, and the more that the commander attacks, it charges up their ability quicker. And then, for example, Emmerich, he creates like a diamond shape on the field, and if you're standing in the diamond, you've got increased defense until the diamond wears out. Caesar the dog, his ability allows a unit to attack again if you charge that up and use that, so you can like do some cool stuff. So like, the commanders are unique,
right? But they're also like units on the map, aren't they? Because in Advance Wars, your commanders like Andy and stuff, they would have like CO powers, which you could like do a power, but Andy himself wouldn't be on the battlefield. He's like kind of, a general behind like commanding. Whereas these units are like actual units that you can use to attack and stuff. Right?
So these units are very, very powerful, and not only that, but if they are killed, that's game over. They're like a king in chess as well. So you still have your HQ.
So that's similar to Fire Emblem then. It's like, if your main like lord dies, it's game over.
So it's that weird combination where you still got your HQ. If that's taken over, you lose, but you've also got a commander, and if they die, you also lose.
Does that mean that if you kill the enemy commander, then you win?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, it also depends on the campaign missions. So there are campaign missions that rely on, say, shuttling this number of refugees out of the map, and there's other stuff that I've come across so far. And there's a few fog of war missions as well I've been doing at the moment, which are pretty hard actually. So the commanders, there is kind of pushing your luck because they are your most powerful unit often, or one of your most powerful units, and they can just wreck face. They also have the ability to heal themselves turn on turn. So this is the biggest difference between this and Advance Wars. So this gets a bit technical if you don't really know Advance Wars, but essentially in Advance Wars, buildings don't have health as such, but you can stand on the building and it heals units, whereas in this game, buildings have health, and when you bring that health to 0, you take over that building. If an enemy owns the building and you defeat the building, essentially the building becomes neutral.
Defeat the buildings, that mean you're like attacking the building? Does it show like an animation scene of your units like firing on the building?
I mean, it's like a barracks, and then you will see the little units sitting in the barracks, and you attack them, and they like attack you back with like throwing stones and crap.
Oh, so like the people inside the building actually can retaliate.
Yes, but there's not actually a unit in that building. It's just been taken over by the opposing forces. So
could they attack you theoretically if you like end your turn standing next to a building? Can that building attack you?
They can't.
Okay, right. Okay.
That building is very much just defense. And
right. I see.
Once that unit once the building is attacked and brought to 0 health, the building becomes neutral. You can then go into a neutral building, and the building will have half the health of the unit infiltrating it. So say I just get and it has to be infantry or like humans. Like it can't. So they're like dog units and stuff you can't use on to take over. So you say you've got a 10 health infantry unit, and it takes over a neutral building. The neutral building is now your building, and it has 5 health. At the start of every turn, buildings go up 1 percentage point in health. On top of this, buildings can heal. So if you're standing adjacent to a building, and this is also different to Advance Wars. Advance Wars, you just plop your units on top of cities and stuff. That's how they heal up.
Yeah.
And that still costs money, but the difference in this game is you just stand adjacent, and you then select heal me up, and you're basically sucking the life force out of the building into your unit for a price. But remember, the building heals automatically 1 percentage point per turn. So it's in your interests to heal from buildings that are not near the firing line, near the point at which you're advancing your troops. Because if you're trying to heal troops from buildings that are about to be taken over by the enemy forces, you are weakening the strength of those buildings by healing from them, and you should leave them alone and leave their defenses as high as possible, essentially.
Okay, I see.
And like Advance Wars, buildings give you more income. More income allows you to recruit better, bigger troops.
So it's a similar idea of like you can just spend money on the map to get new units to pop in.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And so far, there's been very few barracks. So you use a barracks to recruit a troop, and there are very few barracks per map so far. I mean, I'm sure that will increase, but so far there's only been 1 each turn. So you really have to make sure you know what you're recruiting each turn and strategically plan. And that whole healing mechanic that I've just explained quite convolutedly is it's slower and tougher than Advance Wars, and as a result, it makes there's a bigger emphasis on protecting your troops. And I think as a result of that, I think this game is considerably tougher than certainly my experience of Advance Wars.
Do you feel like the length of the maps is longer then? Do you think like it takes longer to go through one mission?
I've seen that in a few of the reviews, and I think honestly, people who are saying that don't remember Advance Wars perhaps as well, because...
Right, because you've played those games quite recently, like Advance Wars 2's in particular, you played quite...
Exactly. I think the earlier missions are probably longer than the earlier missions of Advance Wars, and I'm sure the later missions will be very long, but honestly, most of the Advance Wars missions, middle to late game, were very long as well, so I don't really think this game has much longer missions so far, at least. I'm sure they will get longer, but that's not really an issue for me, personally. Totally. But yeah, I am loving this game so far. I just think that it's exactly what I wanted, and I'm loving the challenge. Like at the moment, I'm getting 1 and 2 stars out of 3 almost every mission apart from the first few, because like
really?
It's just
wow.
It's really hard, and like I'm used to getting 3 stars and A ranks in Advance Wars, and I'm just not getting those. And I think I just need to get my head around the healing system a bit more, because
and like the subtle differences and changes.
This game is very punishing at points, and I'm just naturally a bit weaker at Fog of War. It's always been I've always found it a bit tougher than
it is a bit of a bastard of a mechanic.
It's tough. It's tough, and you really have.
I remember that one map in particular in Advance Wars where it was Fog of War, and like all my units were dead, and I had this one dude who was just running for the fucking hills trying to get to that building, the HQ, get away. And I finally managed to do it, and I was like, holy shit, like I just avoided all these things that were raining down on me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where any of them were, because it was just like blank on the map.
Yeah, that feeling of scraping through the mission and getting a low rank is certainly what I've had so far in a couple of missions, where, you know, a lot of units get obliterated, and you're like, well, I'm not going to get a good rank, they're all dead, but oh well, let's keep going. And I don't really want to replay missions to get 3 stars without finishing the campaign first, so I might as well just truck on, and I'm really enjoying it. And the music is fantastic, and that sprite design is truly kind of special, especially with that.
It's the thing I miss the most about modern Fire Emblem. Right. Is like we don't have the GBA anymore, and so they went 3D with Awakening, and obviously like now with the Switch it's a console game, so it's not going to harken back. But you know, the animation for critical hits is maybe my favorite thing about the Fire Emblem series back in the day, and just having another sprite-based tactics game. Like, we had Into the Breach last year, obviously, which also looked amazing, but like this is a different type of thing.
What if I told you critical hits in Wargroove have nothing to do with luck, and that every single form of critical hit is unique per unit to a strategic move? So,
that's very cool. That's
so,
a neat
for
idea.
example, pikemen critical hit when they're allied next to pikemen, and dogs critical hit when the enemy that you're attacking is surrounded on one other side adjacent by another dog.
So you actually can manipulate when you crit.
Exactly. Bowmen critical hit when you don't move them that turn. So it's sort of feeling like the missile launchers from Advance Wars, but likewise the trebuchets are actually like the missile things from Advance Wars, where you can't move them and attack in the same turn. So you have these archers who are kind of more flexible, and you can move them, and so and infantry critical hit when they're standing next to their commander. So and I can't remember how much more damage critical hits do, but I think it's like a good half damage, like 50% more or something. So
that's usually what crits are. I mean, Fire Emblem is like ×3 damage, which is stupid,
right?
But
it's
most
not
games,
quite that powerful in this game, but it's cool. It takes the luck out of it. Really strategic, and I'm loving it. The story is very shallow, but that's
I mean,
what
you're
it is.
not going to expect that. That's not what you came to this game for.
Exactly.
You know?
The setting is great, and I'm loving this game so far. So that's Wargroove. Hopefully beat it for next time.
Sounds really cool. It does sound very punishing. And you know, I had my struggles in the past with the first Advance Wars, and how like some maps I was like, I just have to use a guide for this because I don't know what the hell to do. It was that distracting for me, and I do want to pick this up at some point. It seems like it's going to be a lot of fun, but yeah, we'll see. I'll get to it at some point, but yeah, that's good stuff you've been diving into there. I picked up a gem from the end of last year, which people were kind of raving about. It is Gris, which is the kind of watercolor, very artistic. I describe it as a moving painting almost game that is very Journey inspired, and very much a game where you look at it and it's like, is that like a game, or is it more like an experience? You know, like one of those things where you're just like kind of walking through and experiencing the beauty and wonder of it. And I was surprised by Gris because it's so much more of a game than I thought it was going to be. I mean, obviously, like it almost doesn't feel like one because the art style is so striking and so visually resplendent that it does feel like you are moving through this watercolor painting, that everything is the idea of the world is that all color has kind of been removed and like lost from it, and so a lot of the game is going through these areas and bringing color back to the world, and so you find the color red and you find the color green, and like slowly and surely it starts to ease more life into where you are and where you're going. And it's really cool because the places that you come back to change, and you can access different areas because you have now, you know, unlocked different parts of the world, which to me definitely appealed a lot more. And I think the other thing that was important is getting abilities and power-ups, which I didn't think. Like, one of the first things you get in this game is the ability to turn into a heavy stone block. And it's very weird because the character that you play as is so thin and like ethereal and wavy, floaty, very floaty, and like she has this billowing dress, and her legs are like these little sticks, and she doesn't really have arms. They're like tiny little things, but the face is like a woman's face, and it's this very I don't know, it's very, I don't know what the painting term is because I don't know in terms of painting. I was going to say impressionistic, but that's probably completely wrong. But it's a very distinctive look that they've gone for with this character. And then you get this power up that turns you into this like almost concrete stone block, and suddenly this billowy dress turns into this very rigid cube, and now you can go through an area where previously like wind is blowing through it and you have to duck behind cover to stop yourself from being blown away, and now you just turn into this stone and you just kind of walk through, but it also allows you to break areas that are weak. So I'll come across parts which, you know, might have a hidden secret behind it, and it's a little kind of crack in the ground, and if you fall on top of it with your stone, then, you know, you're able to unlock some cool things. So that was something that surprised me initially, because I was like, oh wow, this actually kind of has game mechanics in it, and it's going further than I thought it would, because I honestly imagined it to be more of a Journey-esque experience. And not to say Journey doesn't have mechanics, because it certainly does, and it has a lot of platforming, and with Journey the idea is you're trying to make your scarf longer, and so by making your scarf longer you can jump further and get to different places. But that's kind of as deep as Journey goes when it comes to puzzle solving and mechanics, and it's not that complicated. And this is still simple in that way, but it feels much more like it's designed with puzzles and secrets in mind, and there are interesting kind of different ways that they play with that, like joining things together. There's kind of swimming sections. There's an area where you're like flipping upside down, and like this kind of reversed mirror. It really goes to a lot of interesting, diverse locations, and I think the thing that really brings it together is it's just the aesthetic just comes like this synesthesia, which is the art and the music. And I was playing with headphones the whole time. I didn't even play it in handheld mode. I just played it on my screen, and it's definitely a game that you just have to absorb. Like, I would not recommend like having this on in the background while you're doing something else. It's about absorbing the entire thing and really getting lost in it. And one of the things that really sticks out to me is the sound design, because there's something about it that is so well done and distinctive, like from the tiny little tapping sounds of her feet as you're running across a plane, to there's this area with these water mushrooms, and every time you step on them there's this wetness in the sound, and like this thudding of standing on this mushroom that's both soft and hard at the same time, and it's just this incredible feeling. And I don't like, there are not many games I really pick out the sound design. Metroid Fusion is one of my favorites because I talk about like the clickiness of the missiles and the kind of clinginess of the wall grab and the sound of the screw attack and those kind of things that really bring that experience together for me. And this game really has that in a lot of ways, like from the rain to the water to so many different tiny little aspects of it. And that's why I would say that you should play it with headphones on, because it really brings it all together. It makes it this kind of whole. And it's definitely inspired by Journey in some senses. Like there's this area early on where you're like sliding down this desert path, and it's like, oh, this is like an exact part of Journey that you do quite early on as well. But in other ways it's totally different. Like there's a lot of kind of escape sequences, and the thing that I like is that the main kind of thing that you're going through, the puzzles are never super taxing, but they do make you think a decent amount, and they make you use a lot of your abilities together. But there's also areas where there's like an extra collectible that I kind of think of these like the strawberries in Celeste, where you don't really need to get them, like they don't really do anything or affect much, but it's the challenge of figuring out how to do them that is satisfying. And it's like there's this one where, so there are these kind of little bits of cloth, like tiny like red things that you can use to get an extra jump, and so like if you press A near them or hold it, then it like shoots you high up in the air. And so the idea behind one of these collectibles was it's on top of this building, and I can't access this building because it's too high, but when you jump out the water you get a bit of height, and also there are these the red things like in the water. So I had to go to this one place, collect the red things, bring them back round, jump out of the water, use them because they kind of jump out of the water as this one-time thing, and boost myself up onto the building. And it's kind of putting together the elements that are sitting there, and it's not super difficult to figure them out, but it is satisfying to kind of solve those mini puzzles as you go along. And yeah, I just think it's a really chilled, very, very unique experience that has some really striking visual moments. Like some of the art design is just astonishing. It really, there's this part where you're going through almost this Colossus area, and a lot of the game is kind of piecing back together things that are broken, and I don't know really what the story is about, but it feels like it's about, you know, a kind of mother-daughter-y relationship, and the idea that there's this giant kind of hand that holds you at the start and it crumbles and falls, and a lot of the game is like putting these pieces back together. And there is this moment where you're walking through this area, and it's just like these giant statues, and the music is swelling, and it just creates this great, you know, experience and sense that I really enjoyed. And as I said, it's far more of a video game than I expected. Like, it has a double jump, like you get a double jump. That's cool. That's a video game thing. That's a thing that I like. So
how much is it on Switch?
So it was on sale, actually. So I picked it up on sale. I don't know if it's still on sale. It was down to 10 quid. I think it's usually about 12. But I was like, I've wanted to play this. It's a little bit off on discount, so I picked it up. And for 3 hours, you know, you can't go much better, I think. I really enjoyed it. And I think a lot of people have been talking about how it didn't really emotionally resonate with them. And I wouldn't say it necessarily did with me either. But I don't think that's the thing that I took out of it. I kind of just took out the beauty of it and the you know, the whole, you know, experience, and I think it's just very, very well done. I think people should check it out. It's real cool. And the thing that I love about games these days is that so many things come out that just have this art style that I've never seen before, that like doesn't look like it should be a video game, and yet it is. And there were a lot of times when I was playing it, I was like, how am I controlling this? Because it really does look like a piece of art that is somehow I have movement and control over. I think the biggest thing I can say about the controls is, like, it starts off very slow, and it starts off the first like maybe 2 minutes or so, you're walking slowly through this very empty expanse, and it's, you know, it's trying to, you know, say something about like grief and loss, but then after you kind of start moving normally, the controls are really responsive, and it's like the character has a really good sense of movement and speed, and the jumping, like you can move it mid-air really easily. And then I was like, oh, actually this does feel like a video game, and it feels really good to play as well, which is not something that usually happens with experiences like this. Things like, you know, Dear Esther, or like these first-person narrative games, like things like Tacoma, I don't think people talk about them for their game feel, whereas Gris does a lot of that stuff, but also it feels really good and nice to play. So yeah, I'd recommend it. It's really, really cool. The other game I played is another game that came out on Switch, but I played it on PC because I got it for free, because it's just come out, and on Twitch Prime they were just giving it away. And this game is called Pikuniku, and you can get it on Switch at the moment.
This game looks crazy.
It's very weird. I don't really know how to describe it, honestly. Like, it's a platformer, but not really, and it's kind of a puzzle game, but it's not actually, and also it's kind of point and clicky in some ways. Like, you're collecting some things that you need to take back to previous areas.
You say it's similar to Gris in a way?
No. Like, I mean, yes, but no. Like, it's so strange. It's a side scroller, and the art style is very simple. Like, it is so like, its colors are so bold. If Gris is like this amazing like scape of, you know, shading and different nuance, this is just like, hey, how about something is just blue, and it's the same blue, and it's just this block blue, and there's no shading to it or anything, it's just solid blue? How about your character is this weird, like, gangly legged red ball whose legs are kind of like Stretch Armstrong, and they can be used as grappling hooks, and when he walks downstairs, it's just very disturbing. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of weird Mushroom Mario in Mario Maker, like Tall Mario, the really weird one who you get, like, the tall mushroom. Yeah. Very gangly and strange, and that's how a lot of this game feels. It's just gangly and strange. That's my description. That's my review of Pikuniku. So yeah, it's very opposite in that way, and it's more about telling this weird story with some goofy characters. It's kind of a critique of capitalism. Like, there's this character called Mr. Happy, I think, and he just gives money for free to people, but also he, like, takes things from the town. So there's this town, and he's like, hey, here's your free money, and also he is just taking all the corn, so he's just taking all their produce and food. So it's not actually free money, because, like, he's taking shit from you, and the people are like, oh man, this guy's great, he gives us free money, but he's just taking everything, and, like, his robots are, like, taking over. It's mechanizing, farmland and stuff like that. There's that kind of sense to it too, which is weird, because this kind of game you wouldn't think to have some sort of nuance, and it doesn't have a nuance. It's a very goofy kind of weird story, and the dialogue is all over the place. But you're playing as this little guy who the town thinks is a monster, and then, like, they kind of forget about that, and he goes on this weird adventure. You go from, like, different towns. It's all side-scrolling, and a lot of it feels very strung together. Like, it doesn't feel very cohesive from a design perspective, but I think that's what they were going for. Is there's, like, random floating clouds in the sky, and you can, go across these ropes, and there are little puzzles to solve. There's one where the rope bridge is broken, and so you go across, and there's this spider, and you just chat into the spider, and the spider's like, you fucking idiot, why do you break the bridge? And so what you have to do is you have to just kick the spider, and his web creates a bridge, and he's like, what the fuck, man, you just kicked me, and then that's how you solve that. It kind of blends humor into the puzzle solving in a way that it's interesting. I wouldn't say this game is really my thing. I think there's a lot of people out there who look for experiences like this that are just kind of strange and acerbic and have kind of a biting wit to them, and that's kind of what the joy comes from. For me, I need more mechanics to satisfy me, and the game feels okay. It just feels very weird and strange, because you're using the character's legs to, like, string along places and solve puzzles. There's an area where you're going through vents, and you're kind of trapped in this robot facility, and so there is neat ideas in there of, like, you have to turn on these switches, and you're going back and forth between the foreground and background, like, in the vents and out the vents, and if you get spotted by a robot, you have to go back to the beginning. And it's not punishing. It doesn't have any difficulty to it, really, because the checkpointing is very generous, and it just kind of goes from weird scenario to weird scenario with some strange boss fights thrown in there. I don't really know what this game is trying to say or what it even is, but I kind of enjoyed it, I guess. I don't know. It's again very short, and it didn't take me too long to go through. And I just wanted, because it was free and it had just come out, and it had come out on Switch, I thought it would be interesting to play it and see what I thought. And I came away being like, well, I don't know what that really was, and I don't know if I enjoyed it, but it will be for someone, And I think that if any of what I've said here sounds interesting to you, then maybe check it out, And it is like 11 quid on Switch at the moment. I got it for free before it even came. Like, it's so strange. Like, why do they put this game out? Maybe it is, like, leading into that idea of the capitalist critique of some senses of, like, hey, here's this free thing, because, like, the idea of free money, but actually the idea is the real dark part is, like, it's actually marketing. It's a form of, like, viral marketing by giving it free to people, so people talk about it more, so the consciousness kind of gets into, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too deep into this right now, or maybe it's like, because Amazon owns Twitch, and there's that kind of, maybe Devolver Digital are trying to take a stab at Amazon by putting this thing out for free, and this big corporation, I don't know. You can really think about it in a meta way like that, which is fun, but also, it's Pikuniku. It's a game called Pikuniku. What are you going to expect from this? I don't know what to expect. So yeah. I don't really know what to say. That's it. That's Pikuniku. Play it if you want. Don't if you don't. It's very weird.
How long was it?
It's like 3 hours.
Another 3 hours, right.
And, there's these characters who, like, pop up again, and you're kind of doing missions with them. And there's some side stuff you can do. It's fine. It's a game. It's a game. So that's what I've been playing. Lots of cool stuff this week, and I've been getting into some other stuff as well. I've been playing Battle Chef Brigade, which is so cool. I'll talk about that next time. But that game is great, and we'll have a lot more to say on upcoming things because we're kind of starting to get into more releases. Like obviously Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, and Resident Evil and stuff like that. I'm waiting for that big Nintendo game to come out, and Wargroove is the first big Switch game. But like for Nintendo, Yoshi seems like it. So we may have a little bit more to go.
Yeah.
But exciting times ahead. All right, well, that's going to close us out for what we've been playing. We'll be back after this break to talk about some of your emails. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. It is the second segment and that means it's time for your emails. But before I get into emails, I will remind you of our email address, which is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. You can also post a question or a thought in our Discord server. Link to that in the description and on our Twitter account @TNL Podcast. Make sure to jump in there. We've got conversations flowing over in Discord, so you don't want to miss out on that. Right, our first email this week is from Acerbus, who's from the Internet Boys. I recently played Marvel's Spider-Man and thoroughly enjoyed it. I even ended up getting the Platinum Trophy. This email is not about the game, but rather the marketing leading up to it. At E3 2018, Sony closed the presentation by showing part of the game that we now know to be the end of the second act. When I got to this sequence, my save file read 80%. I'm also reminded of the third Super Mario Odyssey blowout at the post-E3 Direct in 2017, which showed all the final few kingdoms and a lot of the most exciting and memorable moments in the game. I'm sure there are plenty of other examples of games you can think of that, looking back on it, we can agree probably showed a little too much. What do you guys think of this trend? Should we just accept that publishers need to show parts of games we may not want to see in order to market them as best they can? How much of the blame can we really give publishers when we seek out these presentations directs ourselves and even keenly look forward to them? Acerbus over and out.
All right. Marketing. It's a big deal. Video game publishers, they do it. We love it. It's weird, isn't it? Because E3 is one of those places where a lot of people look at it and they're like, why is everyone getting excited about people marketing things to you? There's something unique about video games where trailers and excitement it's always about the future. And I think it's interesting because there was someone who's having a conversation about this recently, and they were talking about like, why is it that in video games we're always talking about like the thing that is coming up next? And it's because with video games, so many people, when they're playing something, because games are so long, like it's so hard to talk about games as they're happening, whereas with TV shows, it's like everyone watches them in a certain amount of time. Like they're very digestible. And movies as well. It's like you can see the movie and it's done, and then everyone chats about that movie at that time. And that kind of happens in games, but the thing that unites everyone around games is we can talk about what's coming, because everyone is in the same position. Right. Everyone can talk from the same level when something is coming out, because no one has played it yet, you know? Which is a very interesting way to think about it. And And in that sense, that's why some of the marketing is kind of goes over the top in that way, is because they really want people to get excited and get chatting about their games, and the fun stuff that happens in them. And in the case of Spider-Man, I think it is interesting because really the two parts of the game that they showed before the game came out, the two major parts, are the two kind of big set piece moments of those games. Like there's not a lot of other, aside from the boss fights, like major set piece moments.
Yeah, on Spider-Man, I think it's interesting because Sony weren't scared to show that there was the Sinister Six in this game, but because there's so many different combinations in the comic book history of who makes up the Sinister Six, they weren't giving away who was leading it, or if anything, you think it's Mr. Negative leading the Sinister Six.
Yeah.
Like,
and he was part of the marketing all over in terms of like, he is the bad guy.
So they really protected. Shall we just spoil this? It's obvious now, right?
Whatever.
There's a character, I won't say who they is if you don't know that person yet, and they are actually the leader of the Sinister Six, and that's not made clear in any of the marketing, and in that sense, I think Sony felt they had done a good job of, like...
in some ways, like, misdirecting the audience,
right, Right. So I think that, for me personally, and I saw that footage, and I sort of kind of purposefully glazed over a bit the kind of who all the enemies, like villains specifically, were, and then they were kind of...
Also, you have like a brain like a sieve, and as soon as you see a trailer you forget about it 2 weeks later.
I have a brain like a sieve, which is very useful for video game trailers, because I can, in the moment, I can enjoy the hype. I'm there, and then
it's like with God of War when you're like, oh shit, this giant snake, and I'm like, Bally, like they showed that like a million times,
I mean, they might have, but at the time when God of War was getting hyped, I was very disconnected. I wasn't intending to buy a PS4 at that time,
right?
Which was part of it, so I wasn't very engaged in that sense. Whereas by the time Spider-Man was being shown at E3 last year, I was very much like, I already owned a PS4, played God of War, and it was time for Spider-Man. But yeah, so I think Sony in that sense did Spider-Man well, and from my point of view, because there were some really great plot things that weren't revealed, and if it's just a case of here are some villains that are in the game that don't do a ton plot wise, it's just interesting the way they come into the story. I think they did that well. In terms of Odyssey,
I mean, it's hard though, isn't it? Because like when they're showing off this game, they want to show it in the most bombastic manner possible.
Yeah.
And if they only have a couple of those sequences in the game, by the time you get to it, you're not surprised by them. Like it's not like you play Uncharted 2 and you get to the train sequence and you're like, holy shit, this is crazy, because they didn't really show that in the at least I don't think they showed it in the lead up. Whereas with this game, because they've shown you the big set pieces, you're never really like, there's nothing that shocks you about them. It's like, oh, this is the bit that they showed before. I know this bit, which kind of takes away from it in the moment.
It was quite a big part of the game to go for and it's kind of like, because they kind of gave away their helicopter big moment, which isn't a huge moment, but they kind of did that the year before, I believe. So it's like, the game was so close to coming out. They'd already done the helicopter thing, and they wanted to build the hype, but they didn't want to give away the big bad. And I can see that point of view.
But I think like what we're getting at here more so with the services question is like, that was like the end of the game. Like it was really near the end of it. And I think loads of people have critiques of movie trailers especially, and I think this is starting to change with them, but like showing the whole movie in the trailer. Like so many people complain that you can basically tell the plot of the movie by watching one trailer for it, and they show like scenes from the end in those trailers. And I don't know if now we're moving away from that because they've started to do trailers where things are in the trailers that aren't actually in the film themselves. Yeah. Like with Rogue One, there were so many parts of that trailer that didn't end up. Cool. Avengers Infinity War had a trailer where so much of it wasn't in the film. And I think
that's Disney being very aware of, I guess, the hype cycle, not wanting to spoil. Stuff like Star Wars plots, now the Avengers plots are so under lock and key, and the hype is already there to the point where it's understandable that they're more careful about what's in the trailer, what's not in the trailer. And some action film, a new IP action film comes onto the scene, they probably feel under more pressure to show more of the plot in the trailer to build hype, because otherwise it'll get lost in the ether. Whereas Star Wars and Marvel are so big that they know those movies will do well regardless of the hype created from a trailer, perhaps.
Yeah, and the other thing that is really hard about this is that with games in particular, not only would it be difficult to show stuff that's not in the game, I think a lot of people would be very angry by it. And this is just going by the general reaction of games people online generally, is when stuff gets downgraded or when things get changed from a trailer, people lose their fucking mind. Like with Spider-Man as well, Puddlegate. Like people are like, they took out these puddles. What the fuck are you doing? And especially with the Watch Dogs situation, and even Witcher 3 had a downgrade controversy. If they put out a trailer with shit that wasn't even in the game when it came out, I think people would be, outraged by it. Like I don't think they should be, because I think it's very juvenile and stupid. Yeah. But also, like, if that stuff isn't in the game, like, that's such a waste of the resources and time for the developers, like, making things that don't even end up in there, which is a lot easier on a movie's part, because there are so many ways that you can just shoot additional scenes and have them ready. It's a lot faster to do that than it is to whole cloth create a new area or new place that doesn't end up, or, a scene that doesn't end up in the game. So in that sense, it's a lot more difficult for them to put out a trailer that doesn't have stuff. And to some degree, they do this, but it's usually earlier on development. Like the first trailer for God of War we had is very different from what that part of the game is. There's still parts of it that are in the game, but there are also a lot of moments that are just completely different. So it happens, but I think, in terms of showing late game stuff, and Mario Odyssey for me was one of those instances where it was frustrating, because I got to the point in the game where I wanted to see new kingdoms, and I hoped that there would be some really interesting stuff there. And when you realize that no, you've seen the bulk majority of it, it's a bit of a downer. And like there are those great moments, like with the dragon and the castle and stuff like that, is just like out of nowhere. But a lot of it was known previously, and so you get to that point in the game and you're like, oh man, I wish they hadn't shown this stuff, because it would have been such a joy. Because Odyssey, that first playthrough, that adventure is all about discovery and finding new crazy places. And yeah, I do wish that they hadn't done that.
Yeah, with Odyssey it's weird because so many of the kingdoms were known, and they were kind of the best bit of that game when it came to like reveals. And but that's what's weird, is because that's in complete juxtaposition to Breath of the Wild, which I think was handled so carefully, and the marketing was so perfect in the sense that, marketing was perfect in a way because the game took a damn long time to come out. But what I mean is that trailer at the Switch reveal, which we have gone on about on this podcast a lot, which we absolutely love. They were so careful to only show like flashes of characters, and
this is the weird thing about that trailer as well, is because I think that trailer is very misleading in terms of what the game is going to be. And I still adore the trailer, but when I saw it for the first time, it really gave me the sense that there was going to be a grand sweeping narrative. Like, look at all these characters, look at all these places, like, look at what Zelda is. Like, Zelda is sobbing. Like, there is going to be an emotional punch to this game. And ultimately, the voice acting, the writing wasn't up to par to deliver that. And the narrative wasn't, it wasn't a linear narrative because of the game being so open, and so it was this weird like memories thing that you had to go and find them, which I loved doing, but I never really thought the narrative payoff was that great on those things.
I agree. It's falsely proposing what's going to be great about the game, but in hindsight, having played the game, it did a great job of hyping up the game without revealing the best bits, which I believe is the world and the towns, perhaps. And there was so much, and many of the shrines, like there was so much in that game that was hidden, and the rigidity, is that the word?
Yes, it is.
The rigidity with Nintendo focusing on the Great Plateau for E3 2016 worked perfectly, because it was focusing on the mechanics of how this game functions, and less on the let's look at the crazy scope of where this game goes, because they were building hype for more narrow mechanical reasons rather than looking at the wider game. And that was so great, because that moment when everyone had finished the Great Plateau and everyone explored in different directions, was maybe one of the best bits of that game, and Nintendo did such a great job of keeping that moment sacred almost. It became every gamer had their own unique story off that plateau that I feel wasn't spoiled.
Exactly. Like, what direction do you go in when you leave that place, you know?
Yeah, so
absolutely.
Which is funny because Mario Odyssey is like, look at this kingdom, look at that, look at you're in a dinosaur. Like imagine going into that dinosaur, not knowing that you could capture a dinosaur, and like that would have blown your mind.
It totally would have been. But to counterpoint that, take a look at Super Mario 3D World, which the first trailer was a thud. It was maybe the most boring, like milk toast trailer I have seen in an E3 presentation, because it was like, okay, we did 3D Land, that was cool. Let's just do it again. And there's not much exciting about it. Like, okay, there's this cat, I guess. Yeah. The 4 players, but
and cats.
It felt like such a disappointment, and then later on they recorrected by putting out a trailer that was like, oh, actually, look at this. We do have some really cool mechanics and places that you go to, and that's when I got a lot more excited about the game, which is weird, because if I had just played it not knowing that stuff, I think I may have enjoyed it more, but maybe because they wanted to get people more excited, they had to show a bit more of that stuff, because the reaction to it initially was so kind of tepid. It was like, fine, it's a new Mario game. Like, you don't want that for your new Mario game. You want people to be excited about it so they go out and buy it. And I will say, I was always going to buy Super Mario 3D World, but I was certainly more jazzed to jump into it as a result of that second trailer than I was after the first one, Yeah. And so it's a very difficult balance, because they want to sell you the game, but also there's so much that you lose if you have so much of it spoiled, like some of the late game stuff that is fun.
And I guess Nintendo are always learning. Hopefully, you hope.
You do hope. And I think the other thing to talk about is like release cycle, right? Because it seems in recent times with video games that people are getting closer and closer to announcing and then releasing, Mortal Kombat 11 is a good example, because it was initially going to be touted to be like an E3 thing for last year, but they held it until the Game Awards, and like now it's coming out in 4 months, and people are excited about that. People want to get their hands on it, and they want to see it and play it as soon as possible. And it's a similar thing for like Resident Evil, which usually they would have maybe a 2-year cycle of like announce to release, but with Resident Evil 7 it was like, it's at E3 and then it's in January, and it's like, wow, 6 months. It's a really reduced marketing schedule. It means they don't have to spend as much, and it also means that people aren't waiting forever and ever and speculating, which is why I think we'll talk about it with the Metroid Prime situation, but they put that announcement out mainly, I think, to stop the people being very mad if they had just announced Samus Returns and not announced a big 3D Metroid game, that kind of was what they needed to do to stop the internet from losing their mind, because after the Federation Force, they certainly, I think, have learned a lesson that they should treat Metroid a bit more carefully with their Western fan base. And so they kind of had to do that situation, but now we're in a situation where like we haven't even seen that game, and we don't know when we're going to see that game, and they haven't even shown anything.
Say it's 2022 on the early side.
Yeah.
That's 5 years into the Switch life cycle. Like, how big or small is the Switch going to be at that point in time? We just don't know. It really depends on how well the Switch does in the next couple of years. So like, it puts a lot of pressure on them, and we can talk a lot more about that in kind of with that news in the next segment. But yeah, it's
but in that sense, like I think one of the good things is they never showed Metroid Prime 4, so we don't have anything to compare it to.
I mean,
right? Like,
that is a story right there. Like for a journalist, like they get some info on, and there's rumors about Bandai Namco working on it, and
the Singapore studio, and then like some internal Nintendo. It kind of felt very split up. But in terms of trailers and showing too much of the end game, do you think it's something that they're shifting away from, especially with like the condensed marketing cycle? Like Resident Evil 2 is another example of it was E3 and then it was January release. Like Capcom seem to be doing that quite a bit.
I think there's always going to be some games that companies can't resist the long-term hype cycle, and I guess with Nintendo it is the games like Zelda and what is looking like going to be Metroid, and but for I guess remakes, like you say, Resident Evil 2 remake, maybe that speeds up that process. I mean, that's a horrible rule to use when you look at Final Fantasy 7. I appreciate that, but I think that for some games, that's shorter life cycle, hype life cycle, we should say, is on the rise.
I mean, it gives them less of a chance to spoil it because there's less trailers to put out before release.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and
which doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could mean they still show stuff from the end of the game if they wanted to, depending. But
yeah,
maybe it just reduces it somewhat. I don't know.
And as a service is saying, like, we only have ourselves to blame. Look at how rabid people are just for new games online across the gaming industry. It's like, if you're fans and people who are going to buy this game and talk about this game online have like this craving just to always know so much about these games, who can blame, the developers and marketing teams for maybe letting slip on one too many villains or one too many worlds,
And when your sequence is like the most exciting part, it's like, oh man, this is the most exciting part, but it is 80% of the way into the game. But let's do it because, we want to make sure people are excited. And it's finding that balance, I think, between stuff that you want to keep sacred and stuff that is going to just help you sell more. It's like, because if you don't put out stuff that is exciting enough, maybe the game won't do well enough. So, it's hard. It's definitely difficult.
And generally speaking, there's few times in most of the great games I played from, say, last year where I was like, oh, well, this is boring because I already know about it, sort of. Yeah. Like, I don't get that feeling.
I mean, I think Spider-Man's a good example because I'm like, oh, we got to this bit finally. I was wondering when this bit was going to show up.
Yeah, and I was still aware of that bit as much as I'd blanked out a lot of it, but I still loved that game. And I think there was so much more to offer in that game that
I don't think it took away from my enjoyment about the game overall.
Exactly. Hey, I enjoyed that hype cycle as much as anyone, so I think I'm all up for the hype, and I'm not feeling overly spoiled yet, but we could get there.
And then despite Mario Odyssey being like, I think I was kind of a little bit spoiled by the fact they showed all that stuff. There's so many goddamn things in Odyssey that are surprising and joyful that I just bloody loved it. It was great.
Yeah. Our next email is from Duncan, who's from Kent in the UK. Hi, TNL. Thanks for another great year of podcasts. I joined you over a year ago for your Samus Returns chat and have been here ever since. I love your distinctly British perspective on being a relatively rare Nintendo fan and your reverence to the backlog. There are many games I've been inspired to hook up my old consoles for in the last year due to your enthusiasm. Thank you. My question is around my favourite Nintendo franchise, Animal Crossing. I've been there since the start on GameCube, and while I agree with you that the series hasn't had any major evolution in its structures, I do feel that they have refined the original concept on each new release. Based on your previous criticism of the series, what would you like to see them do next? My thoughts: the Animal Crossing community seem fixated on the idea of getting superficial changes like bigger towns or new animal species. However, for me, the last few mainline games have run out of unique dialogue, conversation too quickly, which results in the characters not feeling as real as anthropomorphic talking animals can be. We're at a point technologically where enhanced AI is more possible, and it would be great to see Animal Crossing fully realize its potential as a lifestyle sim you can lose yourself in. I'd love it if the villagers were to show actual intelligence rather than random conversation, e.g. referencing activities you've done that day or the choices you've made in decorating your house or dressing your character. I can't think of a game that has done this sort of in-depth lifestyle sim before, and it's this sort of magic which the big N should excel in. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again.
Well, thank you, Duncan, for your email. I definitely think Animal Crossing needs a lot of different things. It needs things that streamline a lot of processes, a lot of stuff which I think should have been done years ago, and things that they have a tradition that they stick to. For one, goddamn fruit stacking. Like, come on, man. Why can't fruit auto-stack? Why do I have to go into the menu and stack my own fruit? And then it has a limit of, like, is it 9 or is it 12? I don't remember. All I remember is every time you're collecting fruit, you have to go in, manually stack it. Just fucking auto-stack my fruit, make it so that it takes up one slot, like one fruit per slot. Can I have 99 fruit in one slot? Yes, please. Like, please, like that might be the thing in Animal Crossing that I want the most. Make my fruit stacking goddamn efficient. Because at the moment, it's just it's an inventory nightmare. And I think that's a lot of the stuff with Animal Crossing for me, is just getting around some of the pernickety annoyances of doing your day-to-day activities, to make them more streamlined, to make it so that you can not spend as much useless time going and collecting crap. Like, you had to, in the 3DS game, when you're going on the island, it would be like, okay, have to get as much fruit as I can and like efficiency with it, and then get in as much bugs, and then I have to take it all back to town and sell it, and it's like a pain to get it all in my bag and sell it at Tom Nook, and then go back and Nookingtons or whatever, and it became this routine. It's like, I wish I could just do it all in one and just stay there for as long as I wanted and then leave when I wanted to. Just kind of some of the streamlining stuff for me needs to be improved.
Yeah, and like Duncan's thoughts on making the AI like more intelligent, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be more intelligent. It just could be more almost story driven, just like characters saying.
But the thing for me is that strikes me as a thing Nintendo doesn't invest in. You know, like, they are not a narrative company. Like, they really don't care too much about that stuff, and I think a lot of the stuff in Animal Crossing is cute and well done, and a lot of it I think is down to localization being excellent on those games, but it's very superficial. It doesn't go anywhere with much depth, and I don't think that Nintendo prioritize stuff like, you know, making characters react to you in like narrative ways. I think the mechanical ways they do, but not necessarily.
Yeah, I was thinking more in like a Stardew Valley kind of sense.
Sure,
it's just like these little
like having like cutscenes that are tied to characters,
exactly,
like events that are tied to characters. And I think it's very difficult to do when you have a roster of animals that is pushing like 200 or 300, something stupid.
And then with your suggestion of like the fruit, I was just going to come to this realization, like, maybe we just want Animal Crossing to be a bit more like Stardew Valley generally, and like
maybe,
that could make it stronger. I'm really intrigued that like Duncan references what the Animal Crossing community think, because it's obviously something I don't follow in the slightest. So
not since we were on AnimalZing.com.
Looking up the what do you call them, the pixel art in order to make
just
our
Sonics and
art.
Links and stuff that we could put on t-shirts.
But it's interesting, they just want sort of bigger towns and new animal species.
Like, that doesn't do anything for me. For me, like, I would say if we were going to go down the Stardew Valley route, I would say just dumb it down, man. Like, get rid of all the animals.
Fewer animals, more stories.
Have it so that there are maybe 20 animals total, and maybe everyone gets the same animals, which I think that one of the unique things about Animal Crossing is like every town has so many different villages, so each town is unique. But I would say to make the game stronger from that perspective, if you do want them to double down on narrative, which I don't think they will do, is to have it so that you have far fewer characters, and therefore you can do so much more with them. Like, give them that depth, give them their own stories and things that only happen on certain days. Like, if it's a birthday, like, have an event so that that birthday is like some sad event that happens. Like, what if they get a letter that something really terrible has happened on their birthday and you have to cheer them up? You know, like, obviously Nintendo aren't going to do that because it's a bit too depressing. But I don't know, that's what kind of Stardew Valley was doing. It was going down that route of you know, bringing out a bit more depth to these characters, which I think is a smart way to.
Don't mean to copy and paste too much from Stardew Valley, but more resources and more crafting. Why not? Just like buildings you can build that do different things, or I don't know, just
or for me, it's just like having activities that are different. Like, I think I'm kind of sick of fishing. I'm kind of sick of collecting fossils. Like, give me a bit more variety in some of the stuff that you do, some of the options available to you. Like, is there something like, you know, you can have a car mechanic and like bring in stuff from, you know, the mobile game maybe, and have a more unique, maybe like building aspect to it. And obviously the 3DS game had places that you could decorate your town with, like you could build fountains and park benches and stuff and make it a bit more unique aesthetically. And I think they should continue that, like go a bit further with the customization element, because like making your town even more unique and giving you even more flexibility to change it, maybe like terraforming, like the landscape being changed, like maybe having choices of different types of towns and not having a randomly generated one just the same kind of base, like having different areas. I don't necessarily think it needs to be that widely expanded in terms of like size, because I do like the small town vibe of Animal Crossing. You really getting to know it. Is
the size of the town the same in New Leaf as say City Folk and Wild World?
Pretty much. Like, it's not that much bigger. it's a similar kind of length. And I think the difference is like there's this high street that you can go to at the top of the town, which has all the different shops, like the shoe shop and the other stuff like the museum and like the nightclub, stuff like that they added for that game. I think there is a nightclub in that game. I mean, it's like where KK Slider plays probably and does DJ sets or some shit. I don't remember.
I am very excited about Saturday nights with KK Slider again, I must say.
So good.
It's been enough time where my hype level for Animal Crossing is just feeling good. And like, a lot of my hype will depend on what new things Nintendo do add to this game and when that will be revealed, whether it's at E3 or in a Direct or whatever. Like, I think that there are so many directions Animal Crossing could go in, and that's why it's always quite not depressing but unfortunate that maybe Nintendo don't go a bit more bold, because
it is just baby steps every time.
And I'm sure there would be outrage if they got rid of, say, the fishing competition or the fossil collecting competition or something,
or bug catching, you know, like I like bug catching, I like fishing, but like I've fucking done that in every game. Like, maybe maybe keep those activities, but like add a lot more. Like, give me a lot more variety that allows the days to be a bit more differentiated, so that you can have unique things that you can only do on. And obviously there are events that only happen on certain days, but it's more like, oh, the turnip person's in town, so I can buy my turnips today, or fucking Red the Fox is shifting his shady deals. You know, I think a bit more kind of like unique mechanical stuff that you can do on different days might be quite interesting. But yeah, I
mean, we shall see. When do we think Animal Crossing's coming? September,
I
October?
feel like it's an August, September game. I think it's
You're right.
Like,
the others have all come out in summer, haven't they?
Yeah. And I think we chatted before about like Animal Crossing. Usually, you don't want to start an Animal Crossing game in winter.
Yeah, because
there's not much to do. Be weird. You know?
Yeah.
You want to have access to as many things as possible.
So it's probably coming out fairly soon after E3.
Yeah.
Probably. But yeah, thank you for your email, Duncan. And that is all we've got time for emails. This segment, I should say our email address again is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Please send us your emails. Send us your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. And also feel free to post in our Discord server, link in the description, and also on Twitter @TNL Podcast. You can find our Discord server there. We've got lots of great chats going on. And an emails thread where we would welcome more thoughts and comments. So there you go. We will see you in the third segment for a bit of a news roundup. Be right back.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the third and final part of today's show. And some things happened after last week's show. I think like the big news dropped and we were like, oh, we just recorded. Well, that's great. That really makes a lot of sense for us.
It happens.
Well, I mean, I think it was because the little direct happened with all the indie announcements. And then after that, another big thing happened. Which is kind of pretty important to talk about because it involves Nintendo's probably biggest in terms of AAA big budget game coming down the pipeline, Metroid Prime 4. So a video
we got an
dropped.
email, we should say. Shall we
we
just
do.
go
We can maybe go to that after we've chatted about this a little bit. But so I think I was on a lunch break at work and I was like scrolling through YouTube. And I see this thing. It's like an update on the development of Metroid Prime 4. And I'm like, oh, this is exciting. Maybe let's show a bit of footage. This is going to be good. So I load up this video, and it's Shinya Takahashi, Shinya Takahashi's basically the head of all software at Nintendo. Like, he's kind of like the man who has the umbrella over all of Nintendo's software stuff. I think maybe hardware as well, maybe more businessy stuff. But for definite, that he's in charge of EPD, which is the combined, like, it used to be EAD and SPD kind of combined together now, EPD. So he's head of all that shit. And so he's standing on a white background, and he's basically just saying, like, look, Metroid Prime 4, it was shit. So we're not doing it anymore, except for we're starting it over, and now we're going to give it to Retro Studios to make instead. Okay, see you in 5 years, bye. Obviously, much more nuanced than that, and he was very apologetic. But this is fucking crazy. Like, the level of transparency that Nintendo have given us here is... Like, other companies just don't really do that. And I think they really should. Like, you compare this to something like The Last Guardian, where... just silent, complete fucking silence from Sony for years and years about that game. And then eventually it just pops up again out of nowhere. And it's like, they just didn't communicate with people, and people got very frustrated by that, and they were very annoyed. And Nintendo clearly knew that would happen, because inevitably you go into E3 of 2019, people are expecting to see Metroid Prime 4. It's their biggest game coming up. It was announced 2 years ago. Surely by now we should have something to show. And they knew that blowback would be huge. Like, what if they go into E3 and they don't show it? So they had to get ahead of it. They had to say something. And it's very interesting, because like the like to dislike ratio on that video is actually strikingly strong to the like end. Like, there's not that many dislikes comparative to what you would think of news of this magnitude, of this big game being delayed by this amount of time. I think people just appreciate the honesty. I think people are just very happy that Nintendo have been so transparent and upfront with us about what is going on with this game. And I think it also probably speaks to the fact that lots of people, love Retro Studios and just think that they should be the studio to make this game. So the news that it comes along with is like, okay, yes, we're restarting, but we are going back to the people who originally made this series, and probably are best equipped to do it, even though a lot of the people who worked on those original games are not there anymore. Like, this is still a studio that made maybe the best 2D platformer of the last decade. Like, it's in the conversation. I would personally take Celeste over Tropical Freeze. I know it's probably maybe harder for you, Bally, but it's up there in the conversation of, like, I would say those are the two best 2D platformers of the last decade, Yeah. So they're a studio with ridiculous chops, like, and we don't know what else they've been working on. It'd be pretty sad if it turns out that they just have been working on something and it's just been scrapped again and again. But, like, do you think Nintendo would give Metroid Prime 4 to that studio if they were going through troubled times and not being able to get a project out? I don't think so. I think, like, they have a good trust in them, and I'm excited to see what actually Retro is working on, hopefully at E3 this year, because if they've been handed Metroid Prime 4 now, that should surely say that they now are kind of wrapping up on their current project, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think my prediction at the start of the year was their current project is probably the Starfox Grand Prix thing, and that's hopefully reaching the end of its development. If maybe that's a whole load of rubbish and they've been working on something else, but
I don't know. It feels like it could be a very short release to or announced to release cycle, like we were talking about before. As Nintendo tend to like doing that, and they fucked it up a couple of times this generation with, like, Yoshi, that's been hanging around since 2017. Obviously Prime 4, and obviously Pokemon, which is just like they had to say they're making a Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be refreshing if Retro were a short-term release. Here's the game, here's what the game looks like, and here it's coming out this year. That would be incredibly exciting. But, like, is this the right move by Nintendo? I think ultimately whatever that final Metroid Prime 4 game is will be the answer to that. But regardless of that, the fact that they are being so open is so great. And I think in the past, when Nintendo have said, oh, actually, we're delaying this game and we're going to rework it or restart it in this case, it's always turned out good. Like, famous example, like Breath of the Wild felt like it was delayed so long. I think officially it was only delayed maybe once or something, but it felt like it was at least delayed far longer than that. And by the time it was out and we were all playing that game, I couldn't have cared less at the time I had waited to play that game, because it's that
it was worth it.
It was worth it, and it's the famous Miyamoto quote of, like, a bad game is, like, once it's released, it's always a bad game, whereas a good game, it's
which it isn't really true anymore when you look at how games are these days. Like, No Man's Sky is a great example of, like, you can just make it better with patches and things. Fixes.
So if Metroid Prime 4 is a horrendous game, maybe it was the wrong decision, but at least it was the right decision to be transparent at this point in time. And I don't think it will be a horrendous game. Come on, it's going to be a pretty great game, surely.
I think the fact that they are taking so much pride in this game, the fact that they are treating Metroid with reverence, says a lot about how they view Prime 4. and the importance of it as a release for them. Because in the past, Metroid has not been a series that Nintendo has given a lot of care to. You know, obviously, Other M was a game that looked really good, but ultimately was quite disappointing for a lot of people. Federation Force clearly was just dropping the ball so hard. And Samus Returns is fantastic. I love Samus Returns. I think it's so damn really good. But there are a lot of things about that you know, you can maybe be a bit pernickety about it, and some of that stuff is to do with the original design of Metroid 2. But like, you know, and you know, for me personally, I don't think it looks quite as nice as, you know, sprite-based stuff. But that's just me being a stupid fanboy of GBA sprite-based Metroid. But you know, they are going in a right direction with Metroid at the moment, and it just didn't seem like the company really cared about it before. And I do think that the success of Switch, especially in the Western markets, has really driven them on to care about Metroid Prime in a way that they maybe hadn't in the past. And the fact that it is a Western project originally, like it was a Retro Studios game, despite the fact that, you know, it's produced by Tanabe, they have Japanese oversight with it. It is like the game is made for people outside of Japan. Like, Metroid is not big in Japan. It's why Nintendo usually doesn't care about it, is because it's not successful there. The Prime series was only successful over here. And maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they couldn't get it right. They couldn't figure out a way for it to work. And there's rumors about, like, the development was very splintered between some parts of Bandai Namco in Japan, some parts were internal Nintendo, and it wasn't under one roof. Like, it wasn't a singular team and a singular vision, which I think may be why it kind of went pear-shaped for them, and they were trying something different.
And I think that Nintendo had put sort of people into Retro in Texas for the Prime trilogy before, and like there was oversight in making sure that it was, you know, a 3D rendition of Super Metroid in all intents and purposes, and like that, so that there has been like more linking up before, and I guess it's been such a long time since Metroid Prime 3 that to replicate that synergy, and obviously Retro, a lot of the employees have changed so much apparently, like replicating that synergy is obviously not easy, and
no,
it obviously didn't work with Bandai Namco if they are in the company that was involved. So
right,
we'll see. So shall we talk a bit about the release schedule of this potential, well, not this potential game, this game, and an email that
not a potential game, because God,
yeah,
that'd be a mess.
If it gets cancelled now, God. So, Chariot Goblin from the internet says, "Hello, I'll make this email quick. Following the Metroid Prime 4 delay and restart, I predict that Metroid Prime 4 will release in 2022 to coincide with the 35th anniversary of the Western release of the original Metroid. What do you think? Thanks, and keep up the good work."
So, I strongly agree and I strongly disagree at the same time. I strongly agree it will probably be 2022. 3-year development cycle seems like... Actually, you know what? Thinking about it right now, I don't know if a 3-year development cycle is big enough for a game of this scope. Like, because you think about what the hell is Retro working on right now, how many years has it been since Tropical Freeze? It's been 5 years, you know? Like, that's such a significant amount of time. I think Metroid Prime 4 may be longer than that. It could be 2023, even 2024. Like, will we even have a Switch by then?
Exactly.
You know, are we going to be on the next system?
What is the Switch going to look like in 2022, let alone 2023, 2024? Like, what's the next move by Microsoft and Sony? Are they going to...
I mean, it does depend on, like, how much of the base work in terms of the narrative and the lore and the kind of world building, or if they are just completely scrapping everything and starting again. Like, if they are keeping remnants of it in terms of some of the design and some of the elements, maybe. But if they are just completely doing flip the table, Miyamoto, just start from scratch, I think that it will be significantly longer. Not only because it's a larger scope of game, but it's also an important game, and they want to get it right, and they don't want to rush their way through it just to get it out in time. Because...
And I do hope when it comes out, it is in amongst a healthy churn of other games coming out at that point in time, and that Nintendo don't just like completely blow all the big games in the first 2-3 years, and that there can be, you know, great games coming out even in 22, 23. And I was just saying before, like, I think it kind of plays into, I mean, not that this will change Nintendo's attitude, but the success of Switch will also arguably play into what Microsoft and Sony do in terms of, do they go for something tablet related like the Switch next, or do they stick to their guns on home console only?
Oh man, Sony love to take from Nintendo. It's a historical thing.
Yeah, and
the PlayStation Classic.
Unfortunately,
sometimes
Nintendo
it doesn't
don't
work
like
out.
to take from Sony when it comes to online functionality, but
I
wish
they would. I wish they would.
But yeah,
the other point that Chariot Goblin brings up is to coincide with the 35th anniversary, which is the point I strongly disagree with. Because if you take a look at the state of Metroid on its 25th anniversary, that was a sad state of fucking affairs.
And 25 is bigger than 35. 50
but
is big too.
They couldn't give less of a shit about Metroid during that time when the internet was talking about, it's the 25th anniversary of Metroid, like this big series that people love. They really didn't care. And I think maybe because at the time they didn't have any projects in the works, they weren't really focusing on Metroid. Now we're in a place where they put out a brand new 2D game, even though it's a remake, and they are working on a big game that is clearly important to them. Maybe they do care a bit more, and maybe by that time we'll have had another Metroid game released, because I strongly believe that they are working on another 2D Metroid, whether that's a follow-up with Mercury Steam that's going to come out on Switch, or whether it's a different developer in-house, or maybe they've partnered with, say, Next Level. I don't think Next Level at the moment would be working on it because they're doing Luigi's Mansion 3 most likely. But there is potential for another Metroid to be released before Prime 4 comes out, on a smaller scale. So maybe they care more about Metroid at that point in time. And I think Metroid Prime 4, honestly, has the potential to be the best-selling Metroid game. I think it will be, honestly, just because the way the Switch is positioned, the reverence for the Metroid franchise, the idea that it is going to be portable.
What's the best-selling Metroid game currently? It must be Samus Returns.
I think the original, it's either Super or it's Prime.
Super or Prime 1?
Yeah, I would say. And I don't think any of them... I think maybe a million is probably the highest a Metroid game has sold.
I'm surprised Corruption on Wii wouldn't have done more.
Actually, you're right. Corruption probably has a chance of being the highest selling just because the bump from being on the Wii. And being quite an early release for that system, relatively. So, Metroid Prime 4, this is some of the craziest news in a long time, I think. And it's not necessarily that crazy because we know that video game development is fraught with challenge and often projects are cancelled and redone and things like that. But I don't think companies are really ever this brazen and open about hey, this shit was bad. We got to make it good, yo. We're gonna change everything about this, and we're changing the development studio. That is the part to me that is just nuts. That they just went out there and they made this video, and Takahashi is just look, guys. We've got to do it again, Pretty crazy stuff.
It's crazy. Shall we move on to our next story?
Yes, let's do that.
So, it's this magazine called the Nikkei.
Yes, Nikkei is a big Japanese publication. They're
talking about a new Switch in 2019. Mm-hmm. And it's a mini version of the Switch. They're going smaller, not bigger, smaller.
Yes.
Do you think this is happening? And it's going to be cheaper. Smaller means that maybe kids can get their hands around it more easily than the big old Joy-Cons.
So, a couple things here. First one, I think we talked to this a bit in the past about whether they go bigger, whether they go smaller. I think smaller works because of number one, price, number two, demographic. Price needs to come down in order for them to penetrate a wider market, in order to hit a younger audience. They have to make it cheaper, more affordable, and also less fragile. I think the Switch is a really nifty piece of kit. It is very slick and very nicely designed. It feels expensive, and it feels like if you drop it, it will be destroyed. It doesn't feel like your traditional Nintendo handheld, like the Game Boy, where you can just chuck it at a wall and it's going to be fine. They have that Game Boy in the goddamn Nintendo store in New York, and it survived the Gulf War, and it's melted, and it still plays Tetris, which is stupid. How is that possible? But they need something that kids can throw around and damage and still be fine. The 2DS, which is just a piece of plastic, and it's good. It's a good entry point for a younger...
Prop open the door with that wedge.
Exactly. It is a doorstop,
solid.
Basically. So that's where I think demographically they would go, because honestly, the one reason they need to do it is Pokemon. Pokemon is the big hit for that audience, and obviously a game in that series has come out with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but I think Gen 8 is going to be the big one. I think that's where everyone is going to go in, and they want the install base to be as big as possible, and they want to have it accessible to as many people as possible. So that's why I think the Switch Mini, at this point in time of the Switch's life cycle, makes more sense than, say, going larger or going Pro, which would mean like 1440p or like 1080p screen or something, and like up to specs. I think specs probably stay the same, but they can make it cheaper because prices of components have gone down since 2017 when it launched originally, and they can make it fit that mold. Does it have smaller Joy-Cons? Do the Joy-Cons even come off? That's the other question. And honestly, I think that...
I feel like they have to come off, though.
I think that yes, to some degree, but
because
also
games like Odyssey, where you have to take them off to do the stupid high jump, and like I don't know. I'd be surprised if they're fixed, because
it maybe breaks some modes in certain games. So like you couldn't do the
arms and
right, exactly. Arms is a particular one where,
and the whole point of taking them off and having multiplayer with people. I mean, as it is, the Joy-Cons, when you take them off and play Mario Kart or Smash Brothers with a single Joy-Con on its side, the idea of taking off an even smaller Joy-Con to play Mario Kart on its side just
I mean, for kids
cramp.
though, like for kids that's fine, and if that's where you're positioning it, maybe. I don't know. It is the eternal question of like what is it? What is it? The iteration path here, and Switch is unique because most of their console hardware they never iterate on in the same way that they do their handhelds, and because Switch has the handheld component to it forces it more down the traditional 3DS path of like it will have multiple models and multiple versions of it. So would I buy one? No, because I think I don't want a smaller Switch. I want probably a more powerful Switch. I want a Switch which takes a bit more advantage of hardware and goes a bit further in that direction.
I mean, this one will probably have a longer battery life.
Right, yeah, and that's definitely something I'm looking to as well. Like, I want a Switch which can last a much longer time that I can take with me and not have to worry about constantly bringing a charger and juicing it back up. So there's a benefit there, but I think this is definitely speaking to a market that isn't us right now. And it's looking to expand the audience even further, which is good for them because it just gets unit sales out there and builds momentum for the future.
When do you think they'll show it off?
I don't know, some like random...
Do we think it's real?
The thing is, like, Nikkei have been pretty accurate before. Like, I think they talked about the 3DS XL before that came out, and that was... 3DS XL was, I think, unveiled like a month after E3 or a couple of months after E3. And they had the source on that, and they generally seem to be pretty on top of these.
So we don't know when, but it's definitely going to be before Pokemon. That's
yeah.
Guaranteed.
I mean, you can count on a bundle this Christmas to be the Switch Mini plus Pokemon. I would say, if it is true and it is happening.
Sure.
Which I'm kind of still up in the air about. Like, on one hand, like it's been talked to death, but also it's Nintendo, man. They do strange stuff sometimes.
They love an iteration when it comes to the handhelds.
To be frankly honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if they put out another 3DS before they put this out.
Oh my god.
Because that's just fucking what they do. And it literally makes zero sense, but I would not be surprised if they're like, it's the 3DS home, and it's like a dock, and you put a 3DS in a dock and it beams your TV.
Jeez.
They do some stupid shit like that.
Wow.
Turn the 3DS into a Switch.
I like that.
I said it.
Home console Fire Emblem before it comes to Switch.
No, I think that's going to come out anyway. That's never going to happen. But it probably would. It's fucking Nintendo. Who knows? Okay.
If this thing has a big enough screen and is super sleek, I'm kind of going to be tempted.
Of course you are.
Yeah, in principle. I mean, if it is on the cheap end and it is like the 2DS wedge, then absolutely not. But if they have really gone, and if it's like DS Lite level of redesign.
Talk to me about the DS Lite. The DS Lite is my baby. Oh my god.
Oh, the DS Lite.
It's the hottest console of all time.
Hottest looking system I've ever seen.
Those squishy buttons, man. Those squishy buttons.
Oh, so good. And it's just brighter. It's better in almost every way. Anyway.
I remember comparing my DS Lite when I got it to the original in terms of brightness, and I was like, holy fucking shit, man. Yeah, but like, it was insane.
It's ridiculous.
It was like one was this torch glaring
I sold
light.
my DS to Ali T.
Yeah.
Tried it out once he owned it, and I was like, this
fuck this.
This is like playing in the 90s or something.
Yeah.
Like, it felt weird.
It was a big step up, man. Design wise and like just aesthetics, it was ridiculous. But maybe one day, maybe we'll get a Switch that's themed after the DS Lite. We'd love that. Okay, and then we had the kind of mini Nindies presentation thingy that was in the UK but not in other places, and they announced a few cool games, two of which I think are pretty significant for us to talk about. One has already come out and we already talked about, which was Wargroove, which you're loving right now, and that was really nice to have that kick off the presentation and be like, hey, it's out on the 1st of Feb, which is like, you know,
that was
like
a bit sooner than I think we were thinking. I thought I was starting to think definitely March, maybe at the earlier end, so it's nice it just came.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great, and you're obviously loving that right now, which is brilliant. And we had a few games that are ports that are coming over. So one of them that Ben Pack has been talking about quite a lot recently is called Crosscode, and it came out last year on PC. And it's kind of like a Zelda kind of RPG where you're stuck in an MMO, sci-fi, and it's very pixely. I kind of watched some of the quick look and I wasn't super into it. I don't know what it is about it. It feels very busy to me. But I'm willing to give it a try, see what people say when it comes out on Switch, because he was raving about it. He was really in love with it. So I think
was that out last year? Or?
Yeah, it was last year on PC, I believe. And yeah, I'm waiting to see what people say about the Switch version. Maybe one that I pick up eventually down the line. And then Goat Simulator, which is a game that is it was kind of the start of the trend of like very stupid games like I Am Bread and like streamer games, basically, is kind of what I refer to them as. Which is just like...
I've heard of I Am Bread.
You play as a piece of bread trying to get a toaster. It's stupid.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. It was kind of like the first very like wacky physicsy type thing, and I played some of it when I was doing some like YouTube videos and made some YouTube videos on Goat Simulator because, you know, from Scotland, there was also the in-jokes of me on my YouTube channel about goats and things that was constant. I had a little goat who had always...
Goats aren't even from Scotland, though.
I know, but it was a thing. All the American people I talked to always made fun of me about goats, so it was a meme and a joke. Anyway, so yeah, I've played some Goat Simulator when it had first come out. Now it's like this crazy thing with loads of mods and shit, and I think this version of it has a bunch of that stuff in it, so... If you want to play it, it feels very out of time and out of place now, honestly. It doesn't really, like, because so many of those weird type of games have existed since then, it kind of doesn't feel as unique as it did back when it first came out. But, you know, it was the first kind of in that style, so it's coming to Switch. And then we have Ski Lifts Go Wrong, which it's very similar to a lot of these like builder style games that I've seen before,
like World of Goo and stuff that I've just never.
I don't think World of Goo is kind of the same thing. It's more. I'm more thinking of stuff like the Bridge Constructor games, like Portal Constructor, which was on Switch as well, which is like you have
World of Goo. You're like building structures.
I think so. I need to get to World of Goo. It's one of those games
on Switch,
I've owned.
actually. Yeah,
it is on Switch.
On my watch list.
I've owned it on Steam for years and years and have not got around to it. I will eventually.
Did you hear Beastcast talking about Ski Lifts Go Wrong?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So
definitely.
the part, so Dan Reichert said, "I wonder what would happen if every triangle shape in the world suddenly vanished."
Yeah.
And I mean, this was met with... I understood exactly what he meant, but this was met with quick criticism of what is a triangle shape? Does it count as this spaghetti of cables over here that makes a triangle? Yeah. Will that vanish? And he was just basically trying to get to the point that, in his view, he thought that lots of structures in the world were supported by triangles, and if they vanished,
and that's how you build structures in these games. Is you use triangles as like a solid base, you know, to kind of prop up things. And anyway, it looks really cool. It looks like one of those games that I've always been very curious about this style of game. About like you make a thing, you test it, you see if it works. Kind of pseudo Mario Maker in a way of like, kind of like a bit game developer y. But it's kind of like construction-y and I've always been curious about those games. I've never really played one of them. And it's weird because like when this came out on Switch, it's like, oh, that looks cool. It's like got a 10% discount. And then I log on to Steam and it's like, for some reason I have 50% off it just because whatever. They just gave me a coupon. It's like, hey, you have 50% off this game. So it's the eternal choice, Bally. It's my problem is like it's 50% off on Steam or it's on Switch for 10 times the price.
The eternal problem. I do question physicsy engines, things like that, and how well they run on Switch, because there have been a couple of...
I mean, I think this game is simple enough and it's 2D that it doesn't worry about that kind of stuff. I
hope.
Yeah, I think it's fine. And then we had a couple other games. One was Forager, which looks very kind of whatever. Double Kick Heroes. Like I'm not really interested in any of those games. There are two games that were big deals in this direct, and the big one is Steamworld Quest. The Image and Form are finally making a Another Steamworld game. I say finally when I think they're actually pretty prolific when it comes to releases.
Steamworld game.
Technically, yes, it would be their. No, it would be their fifth.
Really?
Their first game was a DSi game called Steamworld Tower Defense that no one knows about.
Right.
That was the first original game, and then they put out Steamworld Dig, which was their first big hit, and then after that, obviously, they had Heist and Steamworld Dig 2. So this is their fifth game technically. Even though majority of people out there will tell you that Dig was their first game, they are wrong. There was a DSi game before that. So it's an RPG. They're making a card-based RPG in the Steamworld.
In the fantasy setting.
Yeah, I think it looks great. I definitely... The thing that I... And obviously, I think we generally don't like Image and Forms games as ravingly as other people. I think they make great games. I think they're
agree.
Really, really fun. I think a lot of people rate Steamworld Dig 2 incredibly highly.
Those people need to play more other indie Metroidvanias or something. I just feel like...
I think IGN put it above Celeste in their top Nintendo games, and I was like, no. I can't agree with that. Steamworld Dig 2 is fantastic, but it's not
game.
On the same level as some of the other kind of platform Metroid-style games that I've played. But the thing I love the most about them as a studio is their willingness to take this known recognizable thing and use that as a springboard to take risks, because if they had just come out with a game that was an RPG and didn't have any brand recognition to it, not as many people would be putting it on their radar or would be into it. But they are able to leverage this world and this kind of universe they've created of the Steam world to say, okay, our next game's going to be a completely different genre. We're doing something we've never done before. I think that is such a smart idea. It allows them to maintain a base of people who know what that franchise is, but also because the name has more recognition without, across a wider market, it means that people see SteamWorld and they know that they're going to get a certain level of quality. They know what type of game it's going to be almost, even though it is completely different, which is cool. I like that.
Yeah, I think it looks hot. And that's what's so great is that Image and Form have this relationship with Nintendo where they are revealing their new games on a little Nindie Direct mini thing before anywhere else. That's awesome.
Right. And it gives them that association. Even though SteamWorld games come out on every platform, I associate them with Nintendo because that's the way they put their marketing.
And loads of people who own multiple systems will probably pick them up on Switch, unless I guess they own a PC where it might be cheaper.
Yeah.
But
so yeah, that's exciting. Love seeing more of that stuff.
I'm more excited for this next game though.
Yeah. So this game kind of came out of nowhere, even though apparently it's been announced for a little while. It's called Inmost, and it is being published by Chucklefish, the developers of Wargroove. And can we just talk about how Chucklefish just like make, or they either make or they go after games that have the best looking pixel art possible. Inmost, I wouldn't say is like strikingly amazing in its pixel art, but it has a certain style that I very much vibe with, that I think you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't really know what the game is. It looks very kind of horror-esque and has kind of a very dark vibe to it. The color palette is all kind of dark blues and
puzzle platformer.
Yeah, and it has like a grappling hook. There's a section where like a dude has a sword and he's like grinding down the wall. Very actiony. Looks awesome. Looks like kind of a kind of Metroid style exploratory game with some action stuff in it. Looks great. I don't know when it's coming out, but I think it is 2019 at some point. Very much into playing that. And like as we said, like Chucklefish, they published Stardew Valley, made Wargroove. They're now publishing this game, and there's another game called Eastward, which just has one of the most striking visual styles I've ever seen. Just the pixel art is astonishingly good,
Is that
and
coming
it just
this year
feels.
to Switch?
I hope so, but it feels like Earthbound. Like it feels so Earthbound, and I am so down for that. Which is it's a game that's been on my radar for quite a while.
Do you think you have to, like, if your game's published by Chucklefish, you have to like tick a box on the art style? With
yes,
the,
you
like...
do have to have a particular very striking pixel art style. That's what they go for, definitely.
Nice.
And it feels like these indie publishers go for a certain thing. Like Devolver Digital, very much to me is like very grungy pixel art, like the pixel art that I don't really like. Stuff like Hotline Miami and games of that ilk, which are like. They're very kind of, they're not clean. Ollie, yeah, to some degree. Like it's a far more kind of not blurry, but like
just bigger pixels, basically.
Yeah, very very rough pixel art, the Devolver kind of model, and I think they go after games that look like that, whereas Chucklefish definitely go after a much more, my style of refined kind of pixel art, which is cool, and I think it's good for those publishers to have their defined identity, and it's kind of like, indie record labels where they'll, like, Fueled by Ramen, who is the label who did, like, Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco and Paramore and stuff, like, they're all bands I like, and like that record label picked them all up because they all had that particular sound speaking to that particular audience. So I think it's cool that indie devs and publishers are doing similar things.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's it. Pretty big week in terms of, or last 2 weeks in terms of some news and stuff happening relative to the start of the year. Usually not too much is happening, but
it might still be a direct in February though.
There may be. And this doesn't really count as a direct. It was, they did one of these last year as well, which is kind of, it was a UK narration, and it feels like Nintendo UK made this thing. And it had some cool announcements in it, so it wasn't anything groundbreaking, but it's like, great to see the new Steamworld game.
Solid for what it is, really.
Yeah,
cool.
sold me on a new game, Inmost, that's coming out. Like, that's one we're looking out for now for the rest of this year. So yeah, good stuff. Definitely exciting times, as per the usual. But there will be even more exciting times because it's time, Bally, to close the show out and talk about what our next Backlog Club game is going to be. So we had the three choices. Do you want to let people know what they were voting on?
The three choices were Nintendogs Plus Cats, Kirby Triple Deluxe, and Luigi's Mansion 1, the remake on 3DS.
Yes,
so
it's 3DS themed.
3DS themed backlog. This is our 6th Backlog Club. And we asked our patrons to vote, and they did vote in their numbers.
It was very close.
It was incredibly
tight. It was a three-way tie at one point.
It was three-way tie for quite a while.
Which we thought we would have to break it.
And it was broken. I put out the call that it was a three-way tie, and that tie was broken. And somebody voted for Luigi's Mansion, which will be our 6th Backlog Club, which I guess is fitting with Luigi's Mansion 3 coming out.
Exactly, that's
year.
True. No, I've been wanting to play the original Luigi's Mansion for a long time.
I played about an hour of it when I was about 9, and well, older than 9, but when the GameCube came out, and yeah, that was back in the day when I didn't beat games, so it'll be good to get back into that game quite a few years later.
Yeah. Thanks to that person for voting, because now I have to spend 15 extra quid on a game instead of getting the Nintendo Selects version of either Kirby or Nintendo.
And we should say the losers of that backlog, none of the losers of our Backlog Club votes, they will always be recycled back into the mix. Like
at some point, yeah.
We're not going to relegate anything. At some point, they're all going to come back. So don't worry, Triple Deluxe and Nintendogs Plus Cats will enter into future polls, and we'll talk about that in the future. But so we've decided that we will be talking about Luigi's Mansion for the 3DS in episode 139, which will come out on Monday, March the 18th. Now,
absolutely.
If there's some sort of Nintendo Direct or that show gets hijacked for whatever reason because, news happens and we need to make sure the show reflects that news, we might bring that forward an episode or push it back an episode. But
probably push it back just to give people
time.
In
principle, definitely March 18th, episode 139 for that 6th Backlog Club. So thank you.
And we encourage you to send emails on that so we can talk about them during the show. I'm sure a lot of you will have played the original Luigi's Mansion, so even if you are not playing along at the current time with the 3DS version with us, feel free to share your thoughts on the game and how you feel about it and its place and time in Nintendo history.
And we've got a Backlog Club thread in our Discord server, so as I said, link in the description, or hit that link to the Discord server at TNL Podcast on Twitter. It's on there, and we've got a good chat going. I think, what was our last Backlog Club? We got a good chat going on that game.
For Punch Out,
we had a few messages in on there, so let us know your thoughts.
Absolutely. And you can send those emails to which email address, Bally?
Please send your emails to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Obviously, we also would love to thank the people who voted in that poll, who are our patrons, of course, and you can become a patron at patreon.com/thisnintendolife, and we'd like to thank some of our higher tier patrons.
Thank you to our two $10 tier patrons. They are, of course, Atari Alex and my girlfriend Caroline. And thank you to our sponsorship level tier patron. Daniel V. Thank you again for your support. I should say we have an episode of TNL Ranks coming out a week today. For those who don't know, we have TNL Ranks where we rank 5 video game related things, and they come out every other month. And then the months that TNL Ranks doesn't come out, we've got TNL Takes, which is our take on something not less to do with video games, more to do with the wider world around us, I guess, and that comes out on the months that TNL Ranks doesn't, and that's for $5 tier patrons, and you have access to all the podcasts on either of those tiers.
Absolutely. So check them out if you are curious about that. That'd be very, very fun. And yeah, we can be found in lots of different places around the internet. You can find our Twitter at TNL Podcast, and of course that gives you links to our YouTube channel, our Discord, all the various things. You can find me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. Ballyman, I said that weird.
Ballyman, you're a real Scot now, laddie.
Ballyman. BALLYMAN91. That's where you can find me on Twitter.
Lovely. Been tweeting up anything recently? Anything
No,
interesting?
Twitter's been slow. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that like I can't tweet during the day because my work the internet bans Twitter, so I have to go on my 4G. And
Really?
It's a pain to like
Wow.
switch it off and then turn on 4G.
Jeez.
Whatever.
I go on Twitter a bit, but I don't tend to post as much while I'm at work. I just might read a bit. So yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't know, just the inspiration to tweet. I know that I'm always going to share my thoughts on video games on this here show, so
Yeah.
I feel why share my thoughts on Twitter when
I don't know, man. Twitter's a different format. It's very
can
pithy,
articulate
you know?
more of my thoughts.
You can just
more
put out
eloquently.
whatever bullshit. It's great. Everyone loves it. Great, and yeah, you can find us there. Obviously, the show is in various places on the internet. You can find us on iTunes, on Stitcher, any good podcatching app, any downloading one that you can get. You can just find us, subscribe to us on there, and it will download it automatically to you every time it comes out, every 2 weeks, which is very convenient. It means you don't have to worry about going to find it in different places. It's very, very good. Obviously, you can review us on places like iTunes, which is enormously helpful and lets people find the show and gets new listeners in, which is what we love to see and we'd love to hear from.
And if you don't want to review us on iTunes, why don't you just tell a friend about us? Be like, hey,
sure.
You like Nintendo and video games? You should check out this podcast. It's great.
Exactly. Yeah,
You'll
absolutely.
like it.
I always take account of things that people tell me to enjoy if they're my friends, so that's definitely a good thing to do. I mean, Bally, usually will listen to me. I've been trying to get him to listen to Critical Role for like 2 years now. I'm getting there. I'm chipping away.
I'm not on Critical Role yet, but if you made a list of the things you recommended I've tried, it's a pretty long list.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much everything I
think
say.
I need some
Bally,
credit
do this.
for that list before we move on to the gargantuan.
Pretty much my entire
time
taste in music is like, hey, Bally, listen to this. And you're like, okay, done.
I've got you into some bands as well. But
Yeah, no, definitely. It goes back and forth for sure. It's fun times.
just not rap music.
Great. Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to close us out, I think, for this week's show. Thanks, everyone, of course, for sticking with us and listening, enjoying. Lots of fun things to come in 2019 still. Yeah, looking forward to it. So, anything before we go, Bally, this week? Some wise words?
Go play Wargroove. That's a good game. You need to play
There you go.
Everyone needs to play that
very
game.
wise. The most wise of words. Play that.
Such a great game.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see you guys in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you again, and goodbye. The musical interludes used on today's show were Gris Part 2 from Gris, copyright Nomada Studios 2018, and Fledgling Queen from Wargroove, copyright Chucklefish 2019.